Welcome to a recap of today's live code hangout. We worked with Astro Content Collections here to switch blog content to a collection after following the Astro tutorial where we were defining blogs as static markdown files. Here we can see the website. When I go to the blog page, we now have a listing here with some improved aesthetics. We'll look at those in a moment. And I can click on the blog post and it renders the content correctly with markdown rendered to HTML and correctly formatted. There were some tricks we had to go through to get this to all work correctly, and we'll go through those really quickly. So in the code, the main changes, I needed to add a couple of, or one dependency here, Tailwind CSS Typography. And I'll explain why in a moment, but it's relating to rendering markdown content. I think Tailwind has an aggressive CSS reset and automatically rendered content, such as markdown, using just plain paragraphs and headings and lists, is unstyled pretty much by default, which was surprising, but it's not the first aggressive CSS reset I've encountered. I think Bulma also had really strong CSS reset. So in order to get it to work, we needed to create a custom component we'll see in a moment. But essentially, we've got a projects collection we've worked on previously and a blog collection we defined today. And we're using this global, or like this glob loader to use kind of a regular expression sort of search syntax to get all the markdown files from within our data folder, and all the blog posts can be contained therein. And we defined a schema, which is a fairly standard blog schema with a title and a slug, date published, and it's going to coerce this string to a date, and we have an optional date modified, which we might work with later, description, an author, and optional image, tags, a headline. Those are kind of common and aligned with schema.org. This is an interesting one. So once you've defined your main schema, then you can transform it. You can spread the original schema and then add additional fields like a computed field. So what we wanted to do is take these raw dates and format them using a particular formatting style that's consistent across the whole site. And now we can access that on a property called formatted date. So transforming like Zod models after they are instantiated. So you got this Zod object schema and transforming them. Pretty cool. Learned something new today. And lots of things new today. Then we can export our blog collection. I just renamed these for consistency because then we can use this object destructuring, whereas previously we were saying projects is projects collection, and this is just a bit more succinct and conventional. So I wanted to align with those conventions. Here we imported Tailwind Typography, which is important later when we want to render this blog content. But I'll kind of go from top to bottom. Actually, let's go bottom to top. So we have a blog page that now gets our blog collection and grabs all the posts basically, and we map over those. And they're just in the order, I guess, of the file name. So I'll need to sort those and maybe filter them in some cases too. We'll have to determine how to display them as the blog collection grows. We have a blog list item component. Let's take a quick look at that. And it's essentially going to create a list item with some styles and an icon. And if you recall, it kind of renders like this. It's like kind of a card with the title and the publication date, and there's our formatted date and the icon here. And notice the whole card is clickable. So as we're rendering these, at least there's some kind of buffer here, padding where there's no interactivity. But nonetheless, we'll render those out, and they have a nice aesthetic using some component level CSS. Now on our actually rendering the blog post is a bit tricky, it turned out, but we've been working with just regular markdown, static markdown posts that rendered themselves, and everything worked pretty much correctly there. But here we had to define a new component called prose, and this is what lets us correctly render the headings and list items and stuff. I'll look at the prose in just a moment. But we're going to render this in our base layout, and we're getting the collection and a specific entry from that collection, and we're rendering that in context here. So we get static paths. So this is, since we have this dynamic attribute here, we have to define this get static paths function since we're using a content collection. We get this slug from the params, and then we get this specific entry for that slug. And if we can't find it, we're going to raise an error, and that's going to help us at build time so we know that something went wrong. And then we're going to render that and get this content component out of that. We do have some static formatting here that we can just apply, because a lot of the actual blog is defined here, and then the body gets rendered separately, and this is where we had some styling issues. So this front matter is available as properties, and we can access those properties here, post data, formatted date. So we just define all of those. And then we want to come to the body where it's not so structured, it's just markdown. So everything here rendered correctly, but when I tried to render the content, you'll notice it's sort of like semi-styled. And this is because Tailwind has very aggressive CSS reset, and there's probably good reasons for it. We needed to define a prose component that lets the styles render correctly. So let's take a quick look at this. And all it is using is the Tailwind prose semantics, and then telling it the details we want and providing a slot. So it's kind of describing the style, how we want it to render various headers and links and things like that, which is pretty cool. So you, in a way, you get to use your utility classes on pre-rendered content, headings, lists, and I might be able to change the text justification, image formatting, and things like that. So those are the main changes. We just have a few posts, so you can see the blog post. Okay, well, that's been a recap of today's Live Code Hangout. I hope you're doing well, and have a great day.